Ash Werner. Ash, thank you so much for being part of this series, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry that I'm not in Brisbane in beautiful, sunny Queensland, but to be fair, it is quite warm in Sydney, and I'm already struggling. So
yeah, it has been. The weather over the Christmas period has been fabulous here in Brisbane. Prior to that, not so much, including the Test match, which was a bit of a washout at the cricket. So my 12-year-old son didn't manage to get too much cricket in for his birthday. However, it has been beautiful over the last little while. Ash, I am going to start with the first question. We are sitting here on the 6th of January, 2025, believe it or not. 2024, what did that look like for you?
2024 was massive. It's funny because when I think about my 2024 in comparison to other years, it seems relatively uneventful. I got to play a little bit of footy, not too much because I was injured. You know, I was working, I was doing all the things, and I think if I just looked at it at the data points, which I love data, then I would say that it was sort of relatively like uneventful. But having lived it and having overcome all the things that I did, it was probably one of my best years in terms of growth and understanding about myself as an athlete and a person, and making big decisions and trying new things and starting to overcome fears. And so it's so funny because 2024 for me was massive, and I actually really enjoyed it, even though, like I said, on paper, I probably shouldn't have. So
yeah, that's an interesting point about being on paper versus your own personal development and growth. And it's a conversation that I have with a number of athletes. And I think it's fabulous that you've reflected on that you've actually had a good positive year. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's now getting towards the point where you've had a lot of ups and downs and you've learnt a lot of things, that now it's like maybe the scoreboard of tangibility might not be as high?
I think it's so many things. I always say I'm getting a little bit old now, so it's just getting wiser, with age. But I think I just started genuinely looking at things so differently. I think firstly, one of the things that you mentioned is I just kind of got used to that life is the highs and the lows. I think a couple of years ago, I was sort of always saying that, when things go well or when I'm doing well, then I'll be happy and then I'll be achieving the things that I wanted to achieve. And I kind of just started realizing that actually life is not waiting for the good things to happen. Life is making the best out of the bad things so that you have more good things. And I kind of adopted this mentality. I did a lot of psychological work this year, and I started to adopt this mentality that good and bad things don't happen. Things happen and then you make them good or bad. And when I started looking at it that way, it really changed, I guess, the scorecard and the balance of what was happening in my life, because I was just looking at the positives, and I was just learning so much more about myself. And I always used to say that I'm a resilience connoisseur, because so many things have happened in my life, so many ups and downs, and I'm always just like, oh, well, I guess we're just going to go with it. But I think this last year was really the first year that I kind of enjoyed the comeback, and I enjoyed doing the work to get there. And so I wasn't just looking at these peaks. I wasn't just comparing peaks. I was comparing the troughs, but the troughs were actually still peaks for me. And especially coming back from the injury that I had, that definition of success and having to really change my definition of success was such a game changer for me, because I think a lot of people expected me to be really disappointed with the year. But when you go through an injury where people say that, it could be your career done, like no one really knows. And then you're spending like 3 months not running, and then all of a sudden you're running faster than you were before. That's, to me, such a huge leap of success, such a high for me. And yet on paper, even though I didn't get to play NRLW this year because of my injury, I think everyone thought I'd be really disappointed. But I was like, oh my God, I'm running again. Like, I was in a moon boot for weeks and I couldn't put any like pressure through my foot. Now I'm running and like life is amazing. So it was sort of those two things together that were really special.
That's fabulous. Speaking of career, the NRLW hasn't come about sort of at an early age, and you've done a lot of other sports in between to get there. Do you want to give the listeners out there a little bit of a snapshot about your professional and sporting life?
Yeah, it's a long one. As you were saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, what sports have I done? We always used to play a game with my friends and family, which was what sport hasn't Ash done? Because like I just love all sports. But basically I started off I was swimming from the age of like 4, like fresh out of the womb swimming and running as well. I did little athletics when I was little, but I think I was a better swimmer than I was runner. But yeah, I did sort of little athletics, swimming, and then when I got to maybe 15, I started playing netball and touch football because I just wanted to do a bit more of a team sport. And I loved those 2 sports. Those were just such like fulfilling times for me. I really loved it. And I had some amazing teams that I played in for both of those sports, but especially touch football really set me up sort of on a professional trajectory. And then I played touch footy at uni games when I was at uni, where I got scouted for sevens. I got moved into sevens for a year, 7s and 15s. And then I randomly got picked up for bobsled by accident. Then did bobsled for sort of 6 or 7 years, and then took a break from bobsled and then accidentally made NRLW.
Accidentally made NRLW. Yep, cool. Yep.
I feel like accident is like the theme of my life. Like I'm sort of just that person that wanders through being like, oh, I could try that. And then next, like a couple of months later, I'm like, maybe I could do this like a little bit better. And I just love learning. And so that love of learning and that like absolute ignorance as to my own limitations has kind of really helped me in my random sport journeys. But yeah, so that's sort of been me to date, I guess.
So you're the first NRLW player that I've interviewed, and also you're the first NRLW player that I've interviewed that is a former bobsled athlete as well. So I'm interested to know. I'm interested to know where that came from, the bobsled, and also, you know, I've been noticing on your Instagram that you got back out there this year or last year. Sorry.
I did, yeah. It was such a random. Again, it was such an accident. I'll answer the first question first. But yeah, bobsled was an odd one. Like I was playing 15s at the time, of 7s and 15s, and someone said to me, "Hey, do you want to come do some extra training this weekend?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? Like, I haven't gotten enough." And she said that the bobsled team was looking at testing data, so they wanted to sort of see what their national standards should be. So they were taking a bunch of athletes from different sports and testing them. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were Australian trials. So I walked in, I did some lifting, I did some running, and then they were like, "Hey, congratulations, you've made the team." And I said, "What team?" And they said, "The Australian team, these are national trials." And I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be an awkward conversation with my parents." And they're like, "We leave in 3 weeks. We're going to Canada if you're interested in coming." And I'm very much a believer in like things happen for a reason. And at the time I was weighing up 7s or trying something new, and I decided to try something new because it came up and it seemed like a really cool opportunity. And so I did. I went to Canada. I went to Whistler, and my first day in a 2-man sled, I broke both my shoulders in a crash.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. So it was a real entry to the sport. So that was my entry into bobsled. And then kind of once I got injured, I was like, well, I guess I'm stuck here for a while, so I might as well make the most.
Yeah. So both shoulders, that particular injury, did you feel one shoulder go, "Oh, that's bad," and then the other one sort of like, "Oh, it's all right," but then they're both broken, or was like, bang, you're like, "I think they're both broken"?
I didn't actually know. Yeah, well, bobsled crash happens really fast, and I think at the time I had no idea what was going on, and I knew that the sled. So the impact happened, and I felt like, that's a bit sore, but then you're like hanging on for dear life, so you're like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna fly out the back," and then we came to a stop, and then they were like, "Okay, you can get out of the sled now," and I was like, "No, I can't." And so I was trying to like wiggle my way out, and I knew one of my shoulders was like pretty dead, like I just couldn't move my arm. And then the other one, I was like, okay, a bit banged up, it's sore, but it's all right. And it wasn't until 3 months later that I found out that I had broken the collarbone when I went in to get like just scans done, because what I'd done my rotator cuff and my bicep tendon in the other arm. The rotator cuff is like, that's a painful injury. So that was so painful. I didn't even know I'd broken this. And there's a photo of me in a sling like this. And I'm like moving the arm around. And I got a broken
trying to move it.
Like,
yeah.
No idea. So yeah, that was a fun time.
It sounds like you go all in things and give everything your best shot, which is fabulous. Bobsled is obviously can be very dangerous, but also there must be a lot of adrenaline and a lot of thrill. Is that something that it was exciting for you to kind of go, this just gets me the highs? Yeah,
honestly, at the time, no. Like I hated being in fast cars. at the time, my mum could not believe that I was going to bobsled. She's like, you can't drive over 100 on the speed. And I was like, Mom. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, thanks for filling me with confidence. Yeah, it wasn't at the time. I just like had no frame of reference, like absolutely no frame of reference. So you kind of get into this idea where you're like, oh, this is going to be so fun. This is going to be cool. And I rocked up to Whistler, and Whistler is the fastest track in the world on the first day, and just happened to be standing there as the Canadians broke the speed record. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not getting in one of those. That is a bathtub with no safety. Like, what do you mean? And then finally, after some coaxing, I did end up getting in, and then broke my shoulders. So I was like, you know what? Guess I'm stuck here now for a while.
But your resilience taught you, like, okay, let's get these injuries right. Let's get back out there. And then in 2022, I also read that you got very close and selected for the Winter Olympics, but unfortunately you contracted COVID just before. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. There was a couple of things at play. There was, Olympic selection is such a hard time, I think, for any athlete. And we were really on good track to qualify 2 sleds for Australia. And then I contracted COVID going into the last race, which pushed us just under the Swiss team. So there's certain quota spots and how many teams from each country can go. And so they got the second spot. And then it was just selection policies from then on out, which didn't really work in my favor, which is very, very tough when you work your whole life, especially as a self-funded athlete. So that was very heartbreaking, especially because I'd also qualified in 2018 and didn't get to go either. So it was like 2 Olympics, qualified for 2 Olympics, not gone to. And I was like, oh, tough life.
Yeah. And then you did mention self-funded, which is it's a gap that I've been talking to athletes about over the last 3 months or so, which I've identified. And I think there's not just me, but certainly other people have identified in around the Olympics per se, with some sports that don't get a huge amount of funding. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that and what you've done to kind of top yourself up in the meantime while you're trying to chase your dream.
It's a hard conversation. I think no one really likes talking about money. And it's such a harsh reality, especially in a sport like bobsled, which is, a third equipment, a third push, a third driving, that you have to have that equipment aspect of it. But not only that, for us coming from Australia, we have to spend so much time overseas. My Olympic year in 2022, I spent 8 months away on my own dollar. And for me, I also had to buy my own sleds. And I was very fortunate that I got given 1 sled because we have 2 disciplines for women, the individual and the team. And so because of some results that I'd gotten, our Australian Federation had purchased 1 sled for me, but the team sled I had to buy myself, and that's 65,000 euros. 65,000 euros new. Whoa. And I'm the motor, so it's like a motorless car. And it's expensive. And then you have to ship, if you're going to move across continents, like we had to ship one of our sleds from Europe to America, and that's like $20,000. And, you've got to pay for your living expenses, your day-to-day
food,
training costs,
your
food, and we eat a lot. We're basically like horses. And, even something like when you're traveling in Europe, you have to rent a van, which costs like $10,000 to get a van that can fit 2 sleds plus all of your equipment. And then you're paying for every training run you take, and a training run is like $200, and you're taking like 2 to 4 runs a day, and like that all comes out of your own pocket. Your race entry fees, your uniform. It's an incredibly expensive sport, and it's really hard to do it well if you don't have the money. And so I was very fortunate in Olympic year. I had Tia as my brakeman, and Rogue helped us out quite a bit. But even so, like that season cost me a lot of money, and basically the whole time that I've been an athlete, I've been sliding at least, I've been working as well. So I work in a management consulting. So I have an office job, which is 2 very different lives. Let me tell you that. And then any kind of sponsorship or help that we can get in the meantime as well. But it's a very tough life.
Yeah.
Working,
of course. And then your employers probably, obviously you're away and things like that. But have they been pretty good around that?
Yeah, my work has been very supportive. I'm very lucky. I work for Accenture, so it's quite a big company, and they've been very, very helpful with me. Like, it's never really been a problem me taking time off, and all my managers have been very supportive and following my journey and asking for updates. So I'm quite lucky in the sense that, yeah, that I've got a workplace that supports me in what I do. And they actually sponsor an organization called Minerva, which is all around female athletes in work and sport. And so I've gotten to do a lot with them, and it's really awesome.
That's brilliant. Then the transition from the bobsled highs and lows, ups and downs, literally, to then rugby league. And you did have a 15s and 7s background in union, but then to change to rugby league and then to make the move to Brisbane, or to be selected by Brisbane. Can you talk about that story?
Yeah, it happened very quickly, very, very quickly. I think I decided after the Olympics, after watching the Olympics, that I needed a bit of time away from bobsled. I needed some time at home with family, and then I promptly moved to Brisbane. So that was good. But yeah, I just needed some time back in Australia, and I think at that stage it sort of just felt more like a chore than it did something that I loved. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be happy spending that amount of money and that amount of time doing something that at the time was just providing me with a lot of angst and a lot of anxiety. So I decided to take a season off, and I wholeheartedly believed I was only going to take a season off. And at the time, someone called me and was like, "Hey, I know you used to play sevens. Are you interested in going back to footy?" And I said, "Yeah, I've really missed it." And they said, "Well, there's some really good pathways in league, and the Tigers are right around the corner from where you're living." At the time, I was living in Leichhardt. I told them that you might be interested, so you should go have a chat. I was like, "Oh yeah, why not?" And I called the coach, and he's like, "Make sure you've got boots and a mouth guard, and be here on Friday." And it was like Tuesday, and I said, "Oh my God, I don't have a pair of boots." I don't have
Straight to Rebel Sport, or someone that you want to give a plug out to now?
Yep. Yeah, I went straight to Rebel. I got a boys' youth boot because they didn't have any women's boots. It was out of season. I was like, yeah. So I was really honored to get a chance to play with the Tigers. And I had an amazing season. I loved playing Harvey Norman. The Tigers were incredible to me. They were so supportive. And then after a couple of games, I got a call from Scott Prince up at the Broncos, and he said, "Would you be interested in relocating?" And I kind of thought he was joking, but I was like, "Yeah, why not?" And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call saying, "We're going to offer you a contract for 2 years if you're interested." And it's very hard to say no to the Broncos. And a couple of things were happening at the time. Like, a very close friend of mine that had also been in bobsled had passed away, and I kind of just wanted a bit of a fresh start. And so I thought moving to Brisbane was a really good opportunity. And it was, yeah, I learned from some of the best people in the game, and it was amazing for me to be surrounded in that environment.
Yeah, I was going to say that the physical change, the team change, but also such an iconic club. Can you talk about how they welcomed you, and I suppose those early moments of coming to Brisbane and then putting on that jersey?
Oh, it's like your mind blows. Like, I walked in on day one, and kind of everyone at the club knew that I was a very big fan of Julie Robinson because, duh. And I walked in after I just moved there, and I was checking out the facilities, and they said, "Robbo's getting some physio. Do you want to come say hi?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I can't say hi." And they were like, "Well, she's your teammate now." And I was like, I walked into the physio room, and she's like, come have a hug. And I was just like, "Oh my God, hi." I was like crying. Like, it was just such a big life moment, because I'd come off such a low of missing out on the Olympics to then come to such a high of, being in Brisbane, getting paid to play footy with some of the best in the game. And it was a very, my brain just exploded every day at training, and people knew who I was, and like our teammates were coming up and saying hi. And I remember the first day that we had training, we had some fitness, just some extra before preseason started. We were just kind of like meeting up, and Gail Broughton was like, "Hey, sister, so good to see you up here." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're Gail." Like, you're Gail. And it was just this idea that, like, I had watched these women play for years, and now I was going to be stepping onto the field next to them after like 7 games of footy. It was very overwhelming. It was very amazing. And yeah, it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about the NRLW around the intensity levels and out in the field, the games, how you went and how you managed it all? And were you sort of lapping it up, or was there a bit of sort of like, oh my goodness, this is the next level, but I can cope pretty well?
I think it was a bit of everything. Again, same thing as Bob said, like I had no idea what I was stepping into because I had not been in footy for very long. And so for me, it's always about learning. Like I'm such a lifelong learner. And so I really tried to take the attitude of learning into every session that I went into, because I knew I had so much to learn. I knew I was fast and I knew I was strong, but my game awareness was something that I really needed to put the time and effort into. And so, I would rock up to training an hour early every session, and I would stay late and I would do all the extras that I needed to. And so for me, it was a really good motivation to push myself to really learn to play amongst the best in a very, very short amount of time. And I think I made the most of every opportunity that I had, and I'm really, really proud of that. But I think mentally it was a lot bigger shift than I was expecting. And I think the reason is because when I was bobsledding, if I had a bad run or if, we did average in a race, like very few people were watching. So no one was like calling me being like, oh my God, I can't believe you tapped out of corner 9. Like, what are you doing? But when you're
maybe the odd person streaming family members at 3 a.m, maybe.
Like,
yeah.
Oh my God, what are you doing? But like when you're playing rugby league, you're on TV and everything is so public. And I just didn't think about that because I was so in the bubble of like, I need to play. I didn't think of how the outside world would affect that. So that was a really big shift for me. And it was something that I was just trying to get used to every game, but like, it was also amazing because I remember there was one game where I felt like I didn't play very well. And I was in a supermarket that week and I was just wearing normal human clothes. And I noticed that 2 people were following me in the supermarket. And I was like, is it me? Am I paranoid? And then this young girl and this young boy came up to me and they're like, oh my God, are you Ashley Werner? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh my God, you played so well on the weekend. Like, I love hearing about your story. And it was a very sobering moment for me because I think as an athlete, you feel like your whole world is based on how well you play that week and that everyone is going to be judging you. And then you kind of remember that there are so many young kids that are just really excited that they get to watch women play rugby league. And I'm always going to be my own harshest critic because it's just the inner perfectionist in me. But it was a really beautiful moment to remember that like I'm doing something really cool and I'm getting to inspire a whole new generation of kids coming through. And that was a really humbling moment.
Oh, that's fantastic, especially young girls as well, aspiring to become a professional athlete. How do you go with that now in regards to your face on some trading cards or your face on a billboard or people stopping you at a coffee shop and saying hello?
Side note, if anyone finds a trading card with my face on it, please let me know. I would love one. It's been very weird, really cool, really weird. It doesn't really seem real to me still. Like, I think it still blows my mind that like me just doing me and just doing my daily thing is something that other people kind of look up to. It doesn't really compute because to me, I'm like, oh, I'm just waking up in the morning, I'm having my food, and then I'm going to training and I'm just working my butt off to be better than I was yesterday. And then there are girls coming to training with posters with my face on it, and like they know everything about my life. Like I had some amazing Broncos fans like bring me birthday presents to captain's run on my birthday. And they knew that like I love Winnie the Pooh. So they brought me like Winnie the Pooh socks or Winnie the Pooh tea sets. And like stuff like that is just, I don't think I will ever get used to it, but it's such a beautiful way to see how just you doing your daily thing is impacting people that you just never thought about. And I think it made me look at my role as an athlete very differently. I think before I just had such a selfish vision of what I was doing, and it was all about me, and I have to win. And if I don't win, people aren't going to love me, or, I'm not going to be worthy of this. But I think the real success and the really amazing thing is just being able to get back out there and do it, having the courage to make mistakes and learn and accept accountability for that. and then having the courage to say, yep, I'm going to try and be better because that's all I can do. And that's been a really cool shift.
You did mention the word inner perfection, or words inner perfectionist in you, and you also talked about being a lifelong learner. How do you kind of intertwine those two?
Oh God, I'm working on it still. I think I'm so hard on myself. I'm so hard because I just expect so much, and I know that like I can get really caught up in the pressure that I put on myself. And it doesn't matter how many people tell me there's no pressure on you, that I put the pressure on me. And so that's been something that I've really specifically realized mostly in the last sort of 2.5 years. I had to just really change my definition of success. That's been something that I've really been working on. I remember my psychologist said this to me. She's like, oh, what's your definition of success? And I was like, winning? What do you mean? And she's like, so you're not going to be happy unless you win. And I was like, isn't that everybody? And she's like, well, but win what? Like win a race, win the Olympics, win world championships? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't thought about this. And she's like, well, you're holding yourself to a standard that you don't even know what the standard is. And I was like, oh, wow, Jesus, yeah, you're right. And so for me, being the perfectionist that I am, I have to really consciously tell myself, my goal for this week is this, and it's not going to be to win because I can't control the outcome of what happens. I can only control what I do. So, maybe if it's on the footy field, this week I'm going to work on my tackle tech, and then in the game, I'm going to watch all of my tackles back and see which ones are better than the week before. And for me, that is my definition of success. And if I work on that, then the bigger game and the bigger vision will come. But I can't control the outcome. I can't control if we win. I can't control if we play well. I can only control if my mentality is in the right place for me to be able to play well. And that's been a very steep learning curve.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on winning for a second because, I have kids that play sport and they took the scorecard out of various sports until a particular age, maybe like under 12s or 13s in various sports, like it's participation, etc. And that's obviously done deliberately from various bodies to sort of not get infatuated about winning, although kids seem to know the score anyway. Where do you think like your desire to win, the dopamine hit of winning, like, where's that come from? And then only the last couple of years, you mentioned that sort of changed. The question is, like, what advice do you give to younger women and boys playing sport about winning and about the inner competitiveness and the actual, we won, feeling versus not winning?
I think there's a big distinction to draw between being competitive and wanting to win. And I say this from my personal experience. When I was growing up, all I wanted to do was be the best because I felt like I had to prove something to everyone else. It wasn't even about proving it to me. It was I had to prove my worth. And so I based my entire value and my identity around, was I good enough to win? And I think that that's really problematic if I'm honest, because, like I said, you can't control whether you win or lose. You can't control, there are things that you're always never going to be able to control. You can't control the weather. For example, it could be a really wet game, or in bobsled, it could be snowing the day that you rock up and you know that you're going to have to do the best with what you've got and it might not be fair. But you can't control everything that happens. The only thing that you can control is how you perform with the conditions that you're given. And so I think for me, being competitive is about trying to maximize the work that you've done, the conditions that you have, the team around you to be the best that you can be based on what you've done. Whereas wanting to win is kind of taking all of that and it's just saying that I can be better than the weather. I can be better than the other team. I can be better than everybody else. But that's not anything that you can control. You can't control how much work the other team has done. They might turn up and have a really amazing day, and just because maybe the scoreline doesn't reflect the work you've done, it doesn't mean that you haven't played well. And I could never understand that. And so I think my advice would be really focus on what it is that you can control. And I really used to hate the term control the controllables, but it's so true that if you base your value around, working hard and learning what you need to and being better than you were yesterday or the week before, then you can walk off a field with your head held high saying, I did everything that I could, and I'm really proud of that. And I think to me, I had to switch between being competitive with everyone else and being competitive with myself. I really had to compete against me, not everyone else. Maybe there's a tackle that I might have missed a month ago, but I got it today. Maybe there's a high ball under pressure that I would have missed a week ago, but I got it today. And for me, it's those things that really add up to play a good game. And you have to focus on those. And that's what competitiveness means to me now.
Yeah, and then just that inching up, or I think Paddy Mills has 1% better every day etched on his shoes or something as well, which I think is fabulous. But then it's also this tangibility of like where you are, your baseline to get to that 1%. How do you know you're 1%? I find that a little confusing myself in terms of like, what did I do yesterday to kind of get to that 1% from yesterday? Am I 1% better? Maybe I'm 2% better. Maybe I'm not better. I don't know.
Maybe
so it's a bit of a
3% better.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. But the concept is obviously brilliant. It's not this sort of like, oh, I'm going to lose 10 kilograms or I'm not going to drink alcohol or something like that for a year. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I failed miserably, whereas maybe the little habits along the way is the answer. How do you go about goal setting you in terms of you becoming a better person?
So I, for myself, have actually changed this up. I try not to say, I want to be a better person. I say I want to be my favorite person. Because
that's a big change. Yeah. Yep.
It is a big change because I think, like, I know that for myself, I'm so hard on myself, and I base so much of my identity around like what is the value that I can put into the sport that I do. But I forget, and I don't think I really realized until the last sort of 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, that when I am my favorite person, i.e. when I am enjoying myself, when I'm learning new things, when I have a good level of struggle, when I'm surrounded by people that I love and I feel valued in the environment that I'm in, I perform better. And it's not about me trying to berate myself to be a better person, but when I'm just enjoying the vibe and I'm enjoying myself and I feel comfortable, not even confident, it's this, when I feel comfortable and psychologically safe to make mistakes, I play better because I don't put the pressure on myself. And that's been a really hard shift because I've had to make it across the board, not just in sport, because I always looked at myself as the athlete, and then I totally forgot that there was also a life outside of sport that I was trying to prep myself for as well. Like, sport is not everything. And I think taking the pressure off that for me has been so crucial. And I know now, when I rock up to a training session or when I rock up to a game or a race or whatever it is, in the morning, I kind of wake up and I'm like, hey, what can I do today to be my favorite self? Well, I know at the moment I'm going to call my partner. I'm going to have a chat with him because he always makes me happy and he always makes me feel really good about myself. And I know that I'm going to maybe read a little bit because that just makes me feel like I love reading, I love writing, or I love art. So maybe I'll do some drawing or something like that because I know that that's going to put me in a good frame of mind. And so it's about choosing the things to put myself in my favorite state of mind so I can be my favorite person when I accept that challenge of whatever's coming next. And that's been really difficult, but really, really good for me.
And then what about being your favorite person in the zone and maybe being a little creative before and doing something that takes your mind off it but actually makes you happy? Then you get out there and you do have a bad game, or in your own head, like a game that going, oh, I did everything right. How do you pick yourself up from that?
Like I said, I'm a very analytical person. So I'll usually, if it's footy, I'll go back and I'll watch the game. And I'm a big believer in nothing is a failure if you learn from it. So maybe I miss a tackle and I watch back and I'm like, okay, I hesitated here. And that momentary hesitation meant that I couldn't get my hips into the right position. I couldn't dip low enough and she was able to palm me off. Okay, cool. I learned that. I now know. So this week I'm going to practice that. I'm going to get a coach, or I'm going to get one of the girls. I'm going to go an hour early and I'm going to run this exact defensive drill just so I can get that motor pattern going. So I think for me, it's about really going back, realizing or acknowledging what it is that didn't go right or didn't go my way, talking to coaches about it, and then putting in a game plan to practice that so that I then know that the next time I get into that situation, I know what I'm going to do. that helps me a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Jared Lyons on a previous podcast said that Chris Fagan and the Brisbane Lions this year, you either win or you learn, and that was their mantra this year,
100%.
which I think is very relevant to not just sport but also to life as well. And speaking of life, you've always had a vision outside of sport that you are Ash, the sports athlete, professional athlete that signs the autographs and takes the selfies, but then there's another person as well. I'm curious to know who that person is, and maybe from a goal point of view, in 5 or 10 years where you may want to be.
Yeah, this is something I'm honestly I'm figuring out daily, which to me it sounds really weird being, in my early 30s.
Early 40s at 43. I'm 43 and it's definitely early 40s, not early to mid 40s. Yes.
I always say, people think I'm like in my mid 20s. I'm like, yeah, sure, 24, whatever, 25. Age is just a number. It doesn't mean anything. I just always say, don't say it too loud because my knees don't know. So if we can just keep
yes, my lower back doesn't know either. Yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, it's something that I'm figuring out daily, honestly, and it does feel weird being in my 30s and seeing, a lot of my friends and family getting married and having kids, and then feeling like for a long time I didn't know who I was outside of the athlete. My life was very much based in seasons. It was based in 4-year blocks, 6 months here, 6 months there, 6 months here, 6 months there. And I never built in that time for reflection on who I was and the values that I had. And then that I really struggled with that when things were going wrong. I didn't know the person that I needed to be in those moments. And so after 2022, I had a lot of reflection time. Well, I made a lot of reflection time to sit down and even write out the values that I had, the person that I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up in times of stress and hardship, because I think the way that you handle those situations is so much more important than those situations. And I always say, bad things are going to happen, and it's how you deal with those that makes you the person that you are. You can't control those, but you can control what you do next. And that has been my lifelong motto for the past 5 years that I've really embodied. And so anytime something happens to me, I'm always like, okay, this has happened. I have these 2-3 choices. Which one am I going to make? And at the end of the day, like, you always have a choice. And so the person that I am outside of sport, I'm trying to bring that person more into sport, because I'm really enjoying finding out who I am. I'm really enjoying spending time with my friends and my family, and I have a bunch of new little nieces and nephews, and my cousins are having families. I'm really enjoying the family time that I have never gotten in the past because I've been overseas all the time. And I love cooking. So like the creativity of cooking is something that I really enjoy. And it's like that learning process that I'm trying to then take elements of that into my sport, because I realize that everything that I do has a lot of crossover, and I've just always kept it really separate. And now I think it's time for me to begin really like meshing these people together, because I think they're going to make me better in both of my realms. And I think in like 5 to 10 years time, I really want to be someone that's able to share my story. I love talking, but I love listening to people, and I love hearing what young athletes are going through and telling them, I've been through all of it. I've missed out on 2 Olympics. I've had what should have been career-ending injuries. I've, experienced not getting selected, and I want to listen to you talk through that, and I want to help you get through that. And so I would love sharing my story and speaking and mentoring. That's something that I would really be interested in.
Yeah, no, that's I agree. And the prosperity or the prosperous nature of success for people, you want to help and you want to see them succeed. And, teachers do that, and a lot of other professions do that as well. And I love that values about people. I'm curious to know, the athletes that I've interviewed, a number of them want to improve their personal brand for whatever reasons. A number of them jump on Instagram and get the followings up and the likes, etc. I'm curious to know that you're just talking about the sport and the personal life, but Instagram seems to be a combination of both for people. And there's this realist person behind the scenes. It's not the one scoring tries for the Broncos. How have you gone about sort of being a bit transparent with your life on social media?
It's hard. It's really hard because everyone has a vested interest in what you're putting out there. you've got your teams that want you to be this person for the brand, and that's totally understandable. And then you have yourself, and you're like, oh gosh, there's things I can put and things I can't put up. And I think for me, I've sort of just realized that I think I'm funny. Or at least I think some of the situations I get myself into is comical. And I also think that there's so many people out there that are always showing the upsides of being an athlete. And so many times when I tell people what I do or what I'm about to do next, everyone's like, oh my God, it must be so glamorous. I'm like, it is not. No, neither sport that I have done professionally at a high level is glamorous. Let me tell you, like,
and the injuries.
Rugby, exactly, right? Like, rugby, I am working part-time and training full-time. I'm away from my family. I'm literally running into people or getting like dumped on my head for a living, like daily. I'm always in pain. Everything hurts all the time. And I'm always getting sunburnt because I haven't figured out what the optimal amount of sunscreen is.
Right.
And then in bobsled, you're away for like 6 months of the year. Yes, you get to be in some beautiful places, but you're in like minus 25 degrees. And as an Australian, I also, again, haven't figured out the optimal level of sunscreen for that, because you get sunburnt in the snow and you're always cold and you're always wet. And again, everything is always hurting, and bobsleds are heavy and they're hard to move around. And I'm trying to like explain this to people, and I feel like the way that I do it is just on social media. I'm like, you know what, everyone's asking what happens behind the scenes. This is us trying, like when I was over in Europe, like this is us having had our van break down in Lithuania as we drove from Latvia down to Germany. We spent 6 days there trying to rebuild a platform in the back so we could lift two like 175 kilo bobsleds back into the van and repack it with all of our equipment so we could get to Winterberg in Germany for training. And that sort of stuff you don't really see often on social media.
No, you don't. And I did see a couple of humorous ones with you in the bobsled coming down the side one time with a bit of music to it, which I actually laughed on that. So you've won me over as a comedian. And maybe there is a bit of comedy in the future for Ash Werner as well. Maybe a bit of stand-up potentially. But no, it's great. It's great to see the realism around an athlete, because it's just not hashtag success and scoring tries and winning premierships. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of ups and downs, and hopefully the ups are more than the downs. But as you mentioned, you can't the controllables. I've got a couple of final questions, again, around teenage sport and kids sport. You found you're currently playing rugby league for a living, but that wasn't the case when you were a teenage girl. What did you have as a teenage girl aspirations to play, and I suppose your love for sport and how you can sort of have that as a contagious thing for kids to get out there, and how important it is for kids to play sport?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, a very long time ago, there wasn't any of the women's teams that you see now. It wasn't really a viable option for me to be an athlete. And everyone said to me, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be an athlete. And they said, yeah, but like, what do you really want to be? Like, what's your plan A? Because you can't make a living out of it. And that was always really hard to hear, because I'm so stubborn. I'm like, you told me I can't do it, I'm going to go do it. And I did it, even if it took me a little bit longer. But, like when I started playing touch football, I loved playing touch football. And then when sevens became an opportunity, I really wanted to make the Olympic team. I think I've wanted to be an Olympian since the age of 4, to be totally transparent. But I think for me, like just growing up, I loved the opportunity that sport brought. I loved getting to move my body, and I loved getting to meet people and interact in a team. And it always felt like an extension of me. It just felt right, knowing that I had training in the morning, or I had training after school. Like, it was just such a big part of who I was. And now I have figured out we had undiagnosed ADHD the whole time, which also makes sense. But it was just such a good opportunity for me to get a broad spectrum of experiences in school. I wasn't solely focused on my studies. I had the outlet of sport. I found so much opportunity and love through that. And really, like, I think the opportunities that I had through sports since finishing school as well have obviously been so life-changing for me and so life-defining for me. And then now the irony of it is that when I'm working in an office job now, so many of the skills that I have learnt and I have really honed through sport, which to me just feels supernatural, are really high in demand skills in the workplace. And I give actually a lot of talks with that organization, Minerva, that I mentioned before, around what are the transferable skills between athletes and people in the workplace? Why do athletes make such good employees? And it was just, to me, like things like resilience, work ethic, the ability to work to a deadline, and always giving 100%, to me is just so natural and second nature as being an athlete, that when I'm working on a project at work, I'm like, well, of course I'm going to, work to this deadline. I'm going to produce high quality work because it's just the person that I am. And so I think it's so interesting now to me, seeing that all the work I did when I was playing touch football after school on a random Wednesday in high school has led me to be a more resilient and better employee as an adult. And so, I just think everyone needs to get into sport, because you need that teamwork element. You need to understand what it is to work in a team. It's just such a crucial part of life. But just sport is just so fun. There's so many opportunities. You can do anything and everything and learn new skills and meet new people. And sport, I think, is also the global unifier. Like everyone in the world speaks different languages, but everyone knows that if you rock up with like a soccer ball to a field, you don't even have to speak the same language to be able to interact with someone through sport. And I love that. So
yeah, I actually haven't heard that described as well as you've described it there in terms of the advocacy for sport. I think it's 100% spot on of what you said. And the words that you used was I've always had the outlet of sport. And I just think that's a fabulous way to end the chat, because I think there's people out there that are in their work and they are doing their thing and they're having their families, etc. But then there's the outlet. And we live in Australia. It's a beautiful country. We've got the ability to do that. And there's obviously other countries that do have that as well. But, the outlet of sport, the outlet of defining yourself, the confidence, the resilience, and also being part of a teamwork, which is also family, which is also work colleagues, etc. And all the characteristics that come with that. Ash, thank you so much for being on the Scoreboard podcast today. Yeah. Very much appreciated you telling a life story, as well as where you are now and the future plans of being a comedian and other things as well. So I really do appreciate that, and looking forward to catching up following the progress of Ash in 2025.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to you sitting in my first comedic set. So just be ready for that.
Sold.